That was Amanda McBroom singing one of her many compositions, The Portrait. I'm Rian Keating, and you've been watching Spotlight. If you have any comments or suggestions, or if you would like to receive our program guide, you can write to me in care of Pierrot Productions, 640 10th Avenue, New York, New York 10036. Spotlight airs Tuesday evenings at 8:30 on Channel D, Wednesday mornings at 1 a.m. on Channel C, and again Saturday mornings at 11:30 on Channel C. Until next week, this is Rian Keating. Have a good week. Amanda, thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, it's my extreme pleasure.
You were a child of Hollywood.
Yes. My daddy was in films. He was in a lot of films in the 40s. He did the lead in a lot of Errol. He was Errol Flynn's co-star in most of his films. And the first father in a television sitcom. There used to be a TV show called The Beulah Show. And he was the first father of a sitcom. I realize that now in retrospect. And did a lot of television. And my mother was a drama teacher. So it's sort of been in the blood. And I was raised in Burbank. Places, God forbid. Me and Debbie Reynolds.
Are the Warner Brothers a lot?
Well, actually, 5 blocks down. Yeah.
So, how did you become interested in music?
God, I really don't know when I first started. My mother got me into piano lessons when I was real little. And I enjoyed listening to my parents. Both played the piano. My mother played classical. My father played bar tunes and sang along. But I got into choir when I was in junior high school and high school and really enjoyed it. And then the 60s came along and all of a sudden I decided I was Judy Collins. And my aunt bought me a guitar and I started folk singing. And I went around to all the lamb shows and stock shows and fairgrounds and picked and sang my way to stardom when I was in high school. And in college I was a real hippie folk singer. And then, like, the first major professional job I got was in a musical, which was Jacques Brel in San Francisco. And it was like the skies opened up and said, this is what you do. This is what you do best. So I started singing. I did Broadway shows and just musicals everywhere. But I didn't really start writing until the late 70s. Just something to do while I was severely unemployed, which happened a lot then. So I started writing songs, and all of a sudden, when the Rose happened, all of a sudden, people kept saying, "You're a songwriter." And I kept saying, "No, I'm not. I'm an actress." And they kept saying, "Well, now what's paying your rent?" I'd have to say, "Songs." And they said, "Well, okay." So in the last year or so, I've accepted the fact that I'm also a songwriter, not just an actress.
When you were growing up and starting to experiment with performing in children's theater and taking piano lessons, was there any resistance from your parents on your going into performing?
Not at all. My father made me up and my mother made all my costumes. They knew from a very early age that is what I never wanted to work, you know. So neither had my father, he understood. So they supported me from the very beginning. I realize in retrospect now, if I ever have children or if somebody came up to me and said, "I want to go into show business," I would say to them, think about it really hard. It is so difficult. But my dad said, "Go for it." There was never any question in my mind. It was either that or dolphin training. You know?
You had moved to Texas when you were 13 from Burbank. Did you find it much of a culture shock?
Excuse me. It was. You step back in time about 25 years, and you left the country. I lived on the Mexican border down in the Rio Grande Valley, which is a very, very Mexican part of Texas. And some of the kids still rode horses to school. And I went from a junior high school of 3,500 kids to a high school of 250 who all talked like this, you know, when they weren't talking Spanish. And I sort of sat there and said, okay, you're either going to freak or you're going to take over. So I decided to take over. So I just moved in and hustled and wound up doing things like, you know, student body president of the drama club, and playing the snare drum in the band and tennis. And I'm very glad now that I did it, because it gave me an insight into not being a total city person. I understand rural life now, and it helped slow me down. I mean, all the time when all my other girlfriends were on drugs and getting serious when they were 16, I was still, you know, doing the drama club and, you know, the knitting club and stuff like that. It gave me time to grow up. I really liked it.
But that seems to be such a volatile time, you know, those teenage years.
Absolutely. Nuts and craziness. So there are things I regret that I missed. You know, cultural things that I was never able to receive because they didn't come any further south than San Antonio, you know? That was a far way away. The Beatles came to Houston and my aunt wouldn't let me go. I've never forgiven her for that. But on the other hand, I really got to grow up slowly, and I really appreciated that. I know every answer to every Let's Make a Deal question. That was the big entertainment was Let's Make a Deal.
Monty Hall.
Yes. Oh, Monty.
You had written a song called Saturday Night in a Reynosa.
Yeah.
I've been asked by one person to find out, was there ever a Ray? Or are you covering up for somebody?
Oh, there was definitely a Ray. His name was not Ray. Ray rhymes with Chevrolet, which is why I named him Ray. But yes, there's definitely a Ray. He knows who he is, too.
I guess that's all that matters. You had moved to Mercedes when your mother died.
Right.
And this gave you a creative outlet in your song, The Portrait. And one thing I'm curious, because that's such a tender age, how are you able to be emotionally stable, moving to a new neighborhood and assimilating? Who did you rely on for your emotional support?
Well, I realize now that I just shut down. And I didn't, it took me many years to, because I'm a perfect child. I was raised to be the perfect child, you know. Everybody's entertaining, song and dance, lovely, never get mad, never alienate anybody. Which is my mother was from Texas. The southern upbringing does it. And this was unpleasant, my mother's death and all that. So I just put it over here and locked it in the closet till I hit 30. I never paid any attention to it. And it's very strange, that song, which is about my mother, which came from a dream that I had about her, and I hadn't dreamed about her in many years, sort of like was the toe in the door that pried that whole emotional thing open, because I had not dealt with it at all, and I finally had to deal with whatever my relationship was to my mother. And so my aunt, her sister, raised me after that. So I guess she and a couple of my drama teachers were my major emotional support when I was a teenager.
And how were you able to take that emotional experience and put it into writing?
It's the only way. I have a very hard time, even to this day, expressing negative things. I'm a professional Pollyanna. And I discovered in my writing that it was another person. My songs are letters to people things I cannot say to people. The letters to my husband, letters to my friends, letters to the fool down the street. And if I could put them to music, then I could take them and separate them about a foot from who I really am, and maybe it made it easier for me to express things. That was just a letter to my mother. I realize now in retrospect.
One thing Judy Collins had said in an interview, that she didn't start writing until very late because she was very frightened of what she might have put on paper.
Well, the first time I ever performed any of my own stuff for anybody but my husband, I did it in my club act when I first started my club acting. I was terrified because I am responsible. If I'm singing a Broadway song and you don't like it, it's not my fault. You know, it's Stephen Sondheim's fault.
Certainly.
But if it's my words, are you going to buy it or are you not? And the fact that people buy what I have to say, for the most part, amazes me to this day. And it makes me realize that I have something valid that people agree with. People come up after they've seen my act or listened to my records and say, I know exactly how you feel. I felt that way myself. And that's amazing to me. That makes me feel real good.
Well, I'm sure as a writer and a performer.
Yeah.
One thing Stephen Sondheim had said, that there's nothing more frightening in the world than looking at a blank piece of paper. Do you have dry spells when you write? Or?
I will do anything to stay away from the piano. I will do the dishes. I will clean up the dog do. I've been able to keep myself away from the piano for months at a time out of fear of the next thing you write is going to be terrible. And I finally beat it into myself that you may write a terrible song, but there may be one good line in it that you can take out, throw the rest away, and use that for another song. And when I am writing, I have such a good time. And I'm sitting there writing it when the hours are flying by, and I'm thinking, why are you so afraid to start the process? But to this day, I still have I really put up a major resistance to it. And people are always goading me, saying, get back in there and write some more. But, you know, what if it doesn't come sometimes? Sometimes it doesn't come, sometimes it does.
Do you find it harder to write comic songs?
It depends upon the mood I'm in. I enjoy writing comic songs a lot. Comic songs are very tricky because for the most part they require a fairly complex melodic structure. Whereas a ballad, because it's slow and interesting, and sad songs are just easier to write. But I love writing funny stuff. I truly do. And the power of making somebody laugh. I can understand why stand-up comics do what they do, play themselves alive in front of people. It's really a wonderful thing to make people laugh.
When you said when you were growing up you wanted to be Judy Collins.
Yes.
And what other singers did you emulate? Because when one sees your act, there's a lot of elements that...
Oh God, Judy Collins and Joan Baez. I used to call myself Judy Baez a lot. Boy, let's see. I've always... A thing that's been a blessing and a curse for me is the beauty of vocal sound. Barbara Cook knocks me out. Her voice is so beautiful. And God forbid, Sheena Easton's voice knocks me out. She's got beautiful pipes. And for a while, when I was doing Broadway stuff, I was really into the beauty of my voice. And so, and if you're going to do that, you have to go into opera. Because the beauty of the legitimate sound is not commercial. And in the last couple of years, I have learned to just steer away from that except for special moments, because I want my sound to be accessible to more people.
You had sung Marika in the top of our show.
Yeah.
And you had done Jacques Brel, as you had said, when you were very young. And singing his works today, do you find there's a change in your interpretation?
Of course.
One thing, there was a brief revival here in New York about a year and a half ago, and they asked Robert Guillaume to do it, as well as your husband, and he said he couldn't because he didn't have that fresh anger.
Bobby Guillaume was the first really angry black man I had ever met. He scared me to death. He and my husband were roommates before I met my husband. And he was a ferocious man, Bob. And it was because he was in his late 40s then. I mean, I don't know how old he is now. He's got a picture hanging in a closet somewhere. But he was an angry, gifted black man, and success has mellowed him considerably. I find Brel... I was 21 when I started singing Jacques Brel. Jacques Brel was a 35-year-old man talking about the breaking of the heart. What did I know? I knew the notes and I knew what some of the words were about. Now I can sing the squat out of Brel because I understand a lot more about the aging of the heart. I'd love to do it again, a real lot.
You had also taken it to Amsterdam.
Yes.
And how do you find the different reactions in a European audience as opposed to an American audience?
Well, the Dutch people, for the most part, are trilingual. And they speak French, and they speak Dutch, and they speak German, and they always speak English. So comprehension was, for the majority of the time, not a problem. They understood. We sang our songs in English, and the Dutch half sang their songs in Dutch, and we would switch off on the others, the group numbers. They were at first a little bit defensive of Americans coming in and singing Brel, because he was European. He was Flemish, which is very close to Dutch, and they felt very possessive, and they said there's no way we could do it, But they acceded to the fact that indeed, yes, we could. They were very warm to us, because the one thing that we have, which is, I think, very true of American performers, are the masters of the musical. The best people in London and the best people everybody has their own milieu that they are perfect for. And the American musical is the American art form. So we were real good, and they were very impressed by the craft. And we had a great time. The fascinating thing about Holland, it's all of the arts are subsidized. Every town of more than 500 people has a magnificent theater. And we went around, we played not only Amsterdam, but all of Holland. And we would be in Enschede one night. The next night we were going to be in Groningen. And in between we drive through, Den Dolder or something. And they'd say, oh yes, you'll be playing that in 2 weeks. But we're only playing 5 miles away. It says, it doesn't matter. Each town goes to their own theater. So you play all the cities of Holland, which was fabulous. Because nothing's far. I mean, rarely did only when we went to Brussels did we have to spend the night. Otherwise we'd get on the bus and within an hour you were way the hell the other side of Holland. It was great. And they love theater.
What a wonderful experience.
Yeah.
You would share that with your husband.
Yes. Yes, the people, when we'd been doing Brel in New York, and they decided it would be very romantic to send the two of us to Holland. I think they also wanted to get us out of their hair. We'd been around long enough. So we said sure, so we went to Holland for a year. It was great.
And he's still performing now.
George, my husband? Yes, he is. He's in L.A. right now doing I Do, I Do.
How do you find having a show business marriage? Because there's certainly times where you have to be separated.
It's great. I know that there are certain people that have a hard time with it. My husband and I have a superb relationship, and a great deal of it has to do with the fact that we understand that we understand that we have to be on the road. We understand if somebody has to be a recording session, doesn't come home till 4 o'clock in the morning, okay, fine. You've performed until 1, you have to go out and party a little bit just to unwind because you're working from 10 p.m. to midnight. Okay, fine. We understand that the separations sometimes are difficult, and the one thing you really have to watch out for in a double actor relationship is professional jealousy. He's working, I'm not. How do you handle that? One person is successful, the other is not. How do you handle that? It's hard, but we don't feel that we compete with each other most of the time, thank God, because we certainly aren't up for the same roles.
Well, you're very lucky. We had said earlier, the one thing that really made your name well known is The Rose.
Right.
And how did it come to be that Bette Midler came to choose that as the theme for the film?
Oh boy. Well, I did not write it for the film. I wrote it just to write it. It just happened one day. And about a year or 2 years later, my girlfriend said, there's this song called The Rose. And, there's this movie called The Rose, and they're looking for a title tune. And everybody in town was writing a song called The Rose. Marilyn Allen Bergman and James Taylor and Paul Williams and everybody. She said, you've got one. Why don't we submit it? So I said, fine. So she gave it to her friend who was the music director. And he sent it to the producers, who just hated it. They thought it was terrible. It wasn't rock and roll. You couldn't dance to it. So they rejected it. And he sent it back to them. They rejected it again. So there was this shoebox full of rejected tapes. And he picked mine out and he mailed it undercover to Bette. And she liked it, and that's how it wound up in the film and changed my life.
Well, that's some pretty stiff competition.
Excuse me. If it wasn't going to be The Rose, it was going to, what was the song? Let Me Call You Sweetheart was the song that was going to close the film.
Oh, what a horrible time. You've also recorded 2 wonderful records on the Sheffield Lab label. Right. Which is direct disc recording.
That's right.
How did it feel to go into a recording studio?
Knocked my socks off. I've always had a fantasy about making an album. I didn't think it would ever come to pass. This was the ideal situation for me. I had been in a recording studio maybe once or twice, and it's a strange place because it's so different from singing on a stage. It's that little sucker is right there in front of you, and you have to be perfect, and you stop and you do it again, you stop and you do it again, you come back and you overdub, and you come back and clean up, and you punch in and out. Very, very technical. And doing direct disc recording, you stand in front of a microphone, and we invited an audience of about 35 people who sat in the studio. We recorded it over on the MGM soundstage where Mickey and Fred and Judy and everybody. I was standing on the same square of wood that Judy Garland was standing on when she was singing Over the Rainbow. It was blowing my mind. And it was like a live performance. We did 7 songs in a row. And then you do the same thing maybe 5-6 times without stopping. You do all the songs on the side without stopping. And there's a liveness to the performance that is quite wonderful. But you cannot go back in and add choirs and choruses and synthesizers. What is. But for me, it was the ideal way to start making albums because it took my stage experience. I just put on my stage cap and pretended like I was doing my nightclub act. Worked great.
When you're looking for material to sing by other composers, what do you look for?
I look for honesty in an emotion. I try to find things that are different. Granted, everything has been said before. It's just like there's only 12 notes in the scale, unless you're going into jazz and pentatonic and all that kind of stuff. But it's the freshness of a way it is done, and it has to be I'm a real emotional singer, and I want it to be emotional, and it has to be something I identify with. Come Inside My Sugar Waltz is not my kind of song. It's more, Sheena Easton can do that. I can't do that. But there are certain songs. James Taylor makes me crazy. I love him so much. And I love Prince. I love the stuff. I can understand. I couldn't sing any of his stuff, but I understand where he's coming from. I really like his composing. There are people who are fascinating composers from all different. I like honesty of emotion and an intelligent lyric. There's a song that's out right now called One Night in Bangkok. that Marie Head does, which I just found out is like an Andrew Lloyd Webber song from a musical. And the smart man is releasing it and made it a hit single, and that's financing the Broadway show. And it's a fascinating piece of music with a great lyric. The words mean a great deal to me. I'm a real old fogey about it. I mean, everybody knows that the beat is what's around right now, but words mean a great deal to me.
You have a wonderful musical director.
Yes.
Michelle Browerman.
Yes.
And how did you come to meet her?
I was living in a very funky little apartment complex in LA, and somebody told me that there was a producer in the complex, a music producer, and she said you should contact him. So I wrote a little note that said, I write songs, with my phone number, and slipped it under the windshield of his car. The man called me, and I played him some of my stuff, and he was very excited about it, and wound up taking me into the studio and teaching me how to demo songs. And he was going with her. And he said, I have this girlfriend who's a composer, and here you are, a writer. You girls ought to meet. So we met, and after about 3 minutes of hostility, we decided that we liked each other and started writing together. It's the first person I ever tried to collaborate with. And it's been a very successful collaboration.
Which comes first, the words or the music, or is it a joint effort?
For me, the words come first. A phrase. Either the last line or some really killer line comes first, and I build out in either direction. And usually, unless it's something where I've just specifically written the lyric and I hand it to somebody else, if it's something I'm writing myself, it all grows out like a crystal. It all comes together because the music takes me to where the words are going to go. They sort of mesh together.
You're also an actress, which I don't think too many people are aware of. And how are you able to, in dealing with agents and directors, be taken seriously because you're known for your singing?
It's real difficult. When I was known for my acting, I mean, I lived in Los Angeles for 10 years. I've done a lot of television and a lot of stage. And as soon as I had a reputation as a songwriter, they were already confused because I was a singer-actor, hyphenate, that they didn't want to hear about. When I became a singer-writer, actor, they didn't know what the hell to do with me. I've had a very bleak couple of years as far as the acting is concerned because I'm the wrong age. I'm over 30 and we all know that's a no. No. So I do the best I can. So what I'm doing is I'm writing my own projects for me and my friends to act in. Might as well make each other work.
You had said you were writing a musical for yourself and your husband.
Yes.
And what's that going to be about?
It's about the games that men and women play with each other. It's just generally love and what happens, the rituals that we learn when we're children about dealing with the opposite sex and how we turn that into adult relationships. It sounds very pompous. It's actually a lot of fun.
I'm sure it will be. I'm sorry, Amanda, our time is up.
Old poot.
We're going to have another clip from your act, The
Great.
Portrait. And I so appreciate you taking time today.
Thank you,
It's
sweetie.
a pleasure
This
to
is
meet you.
terrific.
Thank you.